Today's topic is on CI/CD of application using Jenkins, that your Kubernetes cluster. So about me, I'm a software engineer at Unicode. It's been 2 years I'm working at Unicode. I work mainly in Python, Docker, Kubernetes, and AWS. So I love exploring new technologies, and at Unicode, it's been a perfect place for me to keep exploring new technology. So today's agenda is going to be short. First, I'll just show you how the deployment process before introduction of CI/CD used to happen, and how deployment process after introduction of CI/CD will be. And in a high level, I'll give the introduction to the stack I have used for today's demo, and I'll walk you through how to set up Jenkins and CI/CD pipeline detailed explanation, and we'll see a demo of it, and then we'll move on to Q&A. Okay, so deployment process before introduction of CI/CD was, it's not visible. Okay, see here. So there are, is it visible there? Yeah. Okay. So there are developers who will be basically making a pull request to a particular repository, and then there is a deployment. There is a deployment that happens. Okay, so what happens is in a company there are more than one team, and they work on a different stack, and the way the deployment happens sometimes can be quite different, and every team has their own strategy to deploy. So basically they write a shell script via which they can just set up, or it does a git pull, and there is steps to do it, or they use any other configuration as a code tool like Salt or Ansible. Okay, so what happens is now team 1 has a different strategy to deploy, and team 2 and team 3. Okay, so team 2, team 3. So how does deployment process change after introduction of CI/CD? So now what happens is, so no matter who checks in the code into a repository, so it goes through a Jenkins generic pipeline. So we set up a generic pipeline which has certain steps which has to be followed by every deployment that has to go through. Okay, and that's how it gets deployed into your particular namespace, like staging or production. Okay, I will walk you through what exactly how does this workflow happen. If you can see over here, so for this demo purpose, what I've done is there is a team A that has is working extensively on API, and one team is working on web app. Okay, so what happens is whenever they make a pull request, it goes through a Jenkins server, and via generic pipeline it will deploy to a corresponding server. Okay, so the high-level introduction to the stack used today is I'm using Docker. So I think most of them know what Docker is. So basically it's a containerizing tool where we package entire application stack into that particular container. And then next thing is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is nothing but it's an orchestration tool to manage your containers into various servers in the cloud. Okay, and when you move to Docker or Kubernetes, one thing that happens that gets very easier is your infrastructure management. So if you think in a way like how the deployment would happen before you introduce. Infrastructure management gets easier when you move into tools like Docker and Kubernetes. And so once you move into any orchestration tool like Kubernetes, setting up of CI/CD gets way easier and simpler, because you don't have to worry much about the infrastructure side, because otherwise if you try to get into CI/CD without moving into thing like containerization, it becomes difficult, because you have to get a server up and you have to start managing the server, install package at the OS level, and it becomes a little difficult. But when you move it to Docker, it gets really simple, because it's just one Docker file that will manage one application and just get it deployed, and it is completely independent to your host machine. Okay. And yeah, then we have Jenkins. So this is how the
Pratap. Your name is Pratap, right?
No, Amit.
Sorry, Amit.
Yes.
Like I have one doubt.
Yes.
Just can you give me a very briefly idea of a Docker, Kubernetes, and Jenkins with a one small example of real world?
Yeah. In the next slide I'll be showing you.
Next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. After that you will see. Just telling you that answer the question. Okay. See. So now we have a developer. There is a repository where all your source code for a web app is stored. Okay. This is Jenkins. This is Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So what happens is when anyone makes a merge request, what happens is typically there is a webhook that gets triggered to for a deployment purpose, meaning whether to trigger the CI/CD. But for for today's session, I am making it keeping it very simple. So I will be having an additional job that will be basically just doing an SCM polling. So if it finds there is a difference in the repository, it will just trigger a deployment. Okay. So once a webhook is called, what it does is Jenkins will run an API job. Okay. So API job consists of a pipeline, a set of rules what has to be done. Okay. So when an API job gets triggered, so it will basically go and deploy it will apply the Kubernetes configuration to Kubernetes cluster, which will go and internally deploy the container. Okay. Same thing now. If you had another application, it would just do the same thing. Yeah, same thing would happen for web app job. It would just do the same. Does that answer what you asked?
Yeah. Like I got some briefly understanding with idea.
Okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I have documented how to set up Jenkins and even Kubernetes cluster. There are scripts which, if you want at home, you can just try it with Ubuntu machine, which will be able to set up and you can go through it. So I'll just walk you through what exactly is required to be done. So this will be there in the slide notes. So what there is. So one thing what I have done is. So this example can be tried without using cloud also, because you just want to get a hang of how you want to deploy a simple application, maybe just for proof of concept into your Kubernetes cluster using Jenkins. So this particular setup can be done on any machine which has a average internet speed, and it is a Ubuntu machine. So all you got to do is just clone this repository and then run this setup softwares, which will install Kubernetes and Docker on your host machine. Okay. So the next thing is setting up of Jenkins. So similar, you just get into this folder and do setup Jenkins. So for Jenkins purpose, what I've done is I'm not installed on the host machine, because Jenkins will install Java, then it will basically install Java and everything, and it will make a machine very heavy. So what I've done is I've just used a LXC container for this guy. So LXC is just a Linux container where I just get a Jenkins, I get a Ubuntu 18 machine and I do all the setup. So tomorrow, if you don't want, you can just stop that LXC container, and you don't want to mess up your original environment. I try to do the same thing for Kubernetes, but for some purpose, because it is container inside container, I was able to run the Docker, but could not run Kubernetes for some reason, because of which I had to install Kubernetes on the host machine. So these are some configuration you might have to paste once you run this command, and you'll open a nano editor, just save it. Okay. After that, you'll have a prompt to log into your Docker Hub account. So what I have in this example, what it does is it basically builds this particular application and it will push it to your Docker hub and then deploy to your Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So first step is setting up of Jenkins server. So here, so basically once you're done with, once this script completes the running, okay. Next thing you can just visit this particular URL, and this is basically a setup how you set up Jenkins. So you just have to get the once you run this command, you'll get this similar token. Just paste the token, okay. To continue, install the suggested plugins, okay. Then you create your first admin user. You give your particular credentials what you want, okay, and just do save and finish, okay. And then your Jenkins is ready. So you have a Jenkins setup on your local machine. Okay. So link is broken. I'll correct it. So next is installing Jenkins plugin. So I think you can ignore this plugin. So you'll have to install Blue Ocean. Okay. Blue Ocean is what it does is it's a Jenkins plugin which will show all your pipeline stage. So there is in pipeline there is stages like this is the initial stage where you do check out, then you do build and deploy, then you do run a test cases, or you do deploy and production. So the user interface which you get with Jenkins is not that pretty, doesn't look that good. So once you install Blue Ocean, you get a really good UI, which I will show you. So it becomes very, very okay. So once you install, so this is the steps. Basically, visit this, and you will be able to install the plugin. So once you install the plugin, setting up of global pipeline libraries. Okay. So there are various ways you can go ahead with setting up projects in Jenkins. So one thing is like you can have a pipeline in every repository, which whenever your Jenkins will do a build and deploy, whenever a job in Jenkins is run, it will pick it from the pipeline and it will start with the particular stages like do git pull, do build deploy of Docker container, and then deploy it onto Kubernetes cluster. The problem of having pipeline at the project level is you can't force all your applications to use a similar type of pipeline, because the whole purpose of you setting up a pipeline is you want it to be really generic throughout across all the teams. They have to follow that step. So what you do is you set up a global pipeline library. So when you set up a global pipeline library, these libraries can be used by any Jenkins job you create, which will generically start taking those steps and get it deployed. Okay. So what you got to do is you basically have to go to a section configure, okay, and wait, I think my screenshot only is missing, so I just show it here. So basically you come to manage Jenkins, you come to configure system, you come to configure system. Here there is global pipeline library. So you give this is a name in case if you have multiple global libraries. This is the branch, and this is the GitHub repository. Okay. So what it does is your pipeline libraries are stored in this particular repository. So if you make a change to a pipeline pipeline file, it will get applied across all the projects. You don't have to go and edit in every project. Okay. So yeah. And then once you're done with this, next is setting up a pipeline project. Okay, so when you're adding an application for say, so what we'll do is first we'll go to add new project over here, new item. Okay, so we choose a freestyle project. Okay, not freestyle, sorry, pipeline project. It's a freestyle project. yeah, we create first we create a pipeline project. Okay, in this what we do is so we define this particular pipeline script in the global pipeline library. So what you do, all you do is you just use the function and pass particular parameters. So what these parameters are is you see the first parameter. I'll explain to you what it exactly is. It's basically a GitHub username, GitHub repository, and a Docker Hub ID. So that it just picks this guy, and I just set it per project. Whenever I create for web app, I set it as web app. For API, I set it as API, and when you build and deploy, just deploys it for that particular. Okay. I'll correct these links. Yeah. So what I did is ideally should be a webhook that should be triggering it, but just for simplicity purpose, I have set up a freestyle project which does where I have configured Git, and I given the branch of where I expect changes to happen. And yet a build triggers, what I'm doing is every 1 minute I'm polling, I'm doing a SCM poll, and so whenever there is a changes that it catches any changes, I add a post build action where I call the actual job that is going to do my deployment. Okay.
So every 1 minute you can pull the changes.
No, every 1 minute it basically just looks at the master head whether it is changed. So if it finds it has changed, then it will trigger the job. So there is a, I can show you that section where that polling happens. I can show it to you. I'll show it to you. Yeah. Yeah, everyone, I mean, is it clear to hear for everyone? Okay, so next what I'll do is for demo purpose, before this, I'll just walk you through this.
For Jenkins, what is the server capacity? It should be in separate server or something, right?
Yeah.
What is the RAM and server requirement?
It depends upon, I mean, the minimum would be, I guess, 2 GB RAM should be sufficient if you are not doing a really great big stuff, but it depends based on what type of, suppose if you're going to make a build, yes,
how much build it requires that?
yes, so it depends upon your use case, yes. Suppose if you're doing an NPM build which is really huge and you might require a bigger server. Or what other feature is there is in Jenkins, what you can do is you can add slaves. Okay, so this is a master server, you add slaves. So your slaves are the ones where you want to do the build. Okay, so if you make that particular configuration, so during the stage when I show you the pipeline where you define, at that pipeline you can tell that okay, run this guy onto this machine. So it will just go and run on that machine. Not necessarily it has to run on the server machine. So it depends how you design.
Got it.
So the polling part, right? You see over here. So this is how it does a poll for the project. So it does a polling, and whenever it finds this is changed, it will just trigger the job. Okay. Yeah. So what I do is now I'll walk you through the pipeline. Okay. So for global. To define a global Jenkins pipeline, what we do is we just have to have a folder called as vars. Okay. Inside vars, it's basically a Groovy script. So you define all your this stages and this over in this script. Okay. So I'll walk you through what we have. So basically, so if you remember in the example I showed you build and deploy, and in parentheses I passed 3 parameters. So they are Git username, repository name, and Docker username. Okay. So I have defined 1 stage, 2 stage, 3, 4, 5 stages. Okay. So what does the first stage do is I'm running all on I have a single node, so I'm running everything on master node. So it will run on the master node. What it does is it will. So what I do is I kind of try to do a clean build. So every project you creates a workspace. So within that workspace you can do a Git clone, or you populate some files. But at the next run you don't want them. So what I do at the beginning of the day, I just remove whatever is there in the particular folder. Okay. then I use I git clone this repository. Okay, so whichever is generic. So if it's a web app, clone web apps API, it will clone API. Okay, and there is something called as kube renderer. So what I have done is I have written. So anyone who knows Kubernetes has worked on Kubernetes. No one has worked. Okay, so what happens is Kubernetes has deployment files. Okay, they are nothing but a YML file where you can configure Kubernetes objects. Like you can say you need to, for this particular application, you need to you want 2-3 replicas to scale. Okay, or 1 replica, 2 replica, and you want to tell that. So there is some component called as services where that's how you expose your service. Basically, service talks to your container, and anyone who wants to access that particular service will hit onto the service. Service will redirect to that particular container. So this everything is managed in a YML file, which are known as deployment file. Okay. So what I have done is I have written a simple script called as kube renderer in Python. It dynamically goes and substitutes values like Jinja values for production and for staging, because sometimes you don't want certain things in staging, some things you want in production, which can be handled in this particular rendering process. Okay. I'll show you how that kube renderer looks. Okay. So suppose if there is any change to that kube renderer, even that needs to be pulled. So this pipeline will pull that. It's generic for all applications. Okay. Then I create a date object, because currently what I do is every build it will tag it will tag a year, date, month, hour and minute as the image, Docker image version. So everyone's aware about it, it's Docker, right? Yeah. So we have a so what I do is a Docker username, repository, and image version. So it's nothing but just like I'm using a Docker Hub registry for this example. So next is build and test. So for build and test, what I do is first I build the Docker image, okay, and we could actually configure running of test cases over here. Okay, so you can actually have, so if you are really building this for a production, then you probably have a way where you could, what you can do is in every repository you can have some file called as a pipeline, some metadata information where you can have test cases and all this stuff. So what your pipeline can do is dynamically read that particular file and take the list of test cases and run the test cases over here. Okay, and once all the test cases passes, it will do a Docker push. Okay, so one thing about the pipeline is if in case any of the command returns anything like -1 or any other error code, it will just stop the execution there. So it doesn't proceed further. So that's the thing about pipeline. So all these steps, it's mandatory to succeed. If it fails at one step, it will just break there on. Basically, the deployment doesn't happen. Okay. So next is deployment staging. So in deployment staging, what I do, I use that kube renderer. I pass the instance status, okay, and the image version, and there is something called a base directory. I'll walk you through what exactly this is. And what I do is just kubectl apply -f. So I have configured in the shell scripts I showed you at the beginning. It has configured to hit the Kubernetes cluster using the kubectl. So basically, I have the kubeconfig file configured. So when I do kubectl apply -f dash, so what it does is it takes this particular std out and it will apply and it will deploy it onto that particular Kubernetes cluster. Okay, this after this step, it is deployed on staging. Okay, so you'll have your application running on staging. So what next? So the next stage is confirmation. Suppose you don't want the code directly to go to production until someone confirms or someone says, okay, it's all good now. I've done all my tests, manual tests from my side, so we can move it to production. So that's where this guy is what it's going to do is it's going to prompt the user saying that, are you sure? Confirm. Then once he confirms, then only it goes and gets deployed onto production. Okay. Yeah. Any doubts in this pipeline? So I'll show you that kube render how exactly is.
is basically Jenkins global pipeline where all the stages will be executed no matter what you say.
Yeah, the one which I just wrote, right? Yes,
Right.
yes. And then not no matter what you call this library. Okay, so it's not like no matter what. So if you see here, for this API.
No, I mean to say all the stages in that.
Yeah. If you call it this way, you have to call it. You have to call the function.
Which are the stages
Yes.
should be executed.
Yes. So you can have multiple.
Stages.
You can have multiple what do you call that, functions defined into your global line. Global
pipeline.
pipeline libraries.
Right.
So
Got
whatever
it.
file name is there, based on that you can just get it. Call it. Okay.
So it is optional to use.
Sorry.
It is optional to use.
Which-
Which stage we have to call?
No, I mean it depends how you design it. It's just like, suppose see, when you create a particular class, you might have 10 classes. You won't call all those classes in one particular program, right? Depends upon your use case. Whenever you want it, you just call it. So you can have multiple such kind of functions and just call for some project. For some project, you might not even require it, so you don't even use that function. Just like normal functions, how we call it. Okay. Fine, right?
Right.
So yeah, that was
This is a public repository.
yes. Why?
People they wanted to look at it.
You can do that. Okay. So what it does is say. So this is the command, right? Product. It is the instance status image version. So this is just a simple Python script that will do that render. So basically, what we do now is. So I have namespace service and deployment. So I'll explain to you what exactly all these things are in detail. So namespace is a Kubernetes object. So what it does is it basically separates all. So you can create namespaces in Kubernetes where you can deploy particular application. It just abstracts from namespace to namespace. So you can have namespace for one particular environment itself, staging or production, or for one team, and you have another namespace for some other team or some other instance status. So they kind of get, it's kind of an abstraction. I mean, it's like you have what is it? It's basically you can separate an application and deploy in particular namespaces. And then we have something called as deployment that I was talking that time. So in deployment, so this is how your Kubernetes deployment file looks like. Where you can give like I said, replica set. If we say 4 replica set, it's going to scale 4 containers for you. Suppose we have a high traffic, so it can start serving it really well. And you can even limit per particular container how much memory it can use, how much CPU it can use. All those things are tweakable. Okay. So now why this cube render is because I want to dynamically substitute this particular values over here. Okay. So this cube render is what it's going to do is it's going to take a constant .yml. Okay. From here it's just going to pick those values per instance status and start substituting them. Okay. So suppose this is just a normal YML syntax. So example, ports can't be same in one Kubernetes cluster, one global port can't be same, so it has to be different. If I have 2 namespaces running similar application, so this can just change the particular port. Okay.
Is there any platform dependency
For what?
to this?
For Kubernetes?
Yes.
No, you can run. You can have servers that runs Windows and servers run Linux, and you can actually provision them and make them communicate. But your application always needs to go into a particular OS. So you can actually have in deployment file only. You can have something called as node selectors, where you say, or there are some other way where you say that okay, if the host machine is Windows, then only deploy my particular container on that machine. Others don't deploy. If you have mixture of Windows and Linux containers, it is possible. Okay. Yeah. So this is a structure everyone has to follow. So in any application that comes needs to get into Kubernetes. What I have, it has to have a folder called a deploy file, and it has to have a structure like this for me. Okay. So any questions on this particular thing? No, right? We'll see it in action. So. Anything with this? Everything's clear with the global pipeline libraries, right? Okay, fine. And we'll move to the next thing. Okay, do the demo itself. So now what I'll do is first I'll walk you through how the Kubernetes setup works. So I have two namespaces: staging TechMine 3 and production TechMine 3. Okay. So if you go to staging TechMine 3, so it will have it has two deployments, that is TechMine 3 web app and API. So yeah, deployment is one of the Kubernetes object which will go and create pods, and you can scale those pods. I can show you after scaling how they look. I can show you. Basically over here only, if you go scale, you can just start scaling your application. So in case normal run production, you might have a lot of servers. So when you scale, these containers won't be that heavy. So you just scale it up. You don't have to bother about doing installing tools at your infrastructure level. Okay. Here are the pods. So pods in Kubernetes is something that wraps container. Okay, so container is running inside pod. And other thing is the service. So service has particular match labels which it knows when a request comes to this particular port, which pods to route it through. So all this happens in this way. Okay. So what we'll do now is, I'll basically show you my application. So I have two things. I have TechMine 3 API. So this API, the detector structure is this way. So you have a deploy files, like which will be used by kuberender to generate the deployment file. Okay. Which has again just now what I showed to you: service, deployment, and there is that namespace. Okay. So this is my Docker file. So basically install Python and all the requirements, and I copy my source file. So it's a very simple Flask application. What it does is basically reads a. So what I've done is I've created a data set just to simulate a production API, which will just read that particular CSV, and it will give us a JSON response. Okay, this is what one of my module does. Okay, so another module that I have is web app, same structure. Okay, it has a Docker file which runs a PHP, which will basically consume that particular API and render it onto the screen. Okay. So one thing good about Kubernetes is, like, if you want if your application are inside Kubernetes and they want to communicate to each other, like API, this is an internal API. I wouldn't want it to be publicly available, and since it is container, it can go and get spawned at various other host machines. So the host IP can always change. You can't depend on the host IP address. So that's where that service which we define comes in handy. I just do service -API, so it will automatically do a name resolution and route, and it will connect. Okay. So that's why I say infrastructure management becomes really simple when you move into tools like this. This is the application. Okay. This is the staging environment. Okay. Just open it. Just opens the Twitter profile. Yeah, so this is the staging environment, and the production environment is I haven't deployed it in production. Yeah, I have not deployed in production yet. Okay, just look at the time, okay? An hour and 10 hour back. So what we will do now is, okay, one more thing. This staging variable, staging, what you can see, it's dynamic, okay? It's set as an environment variable. So in that cube renderer, when I pass instance that is a staging of production, it just goes and sets it as an environment variable from where it picks and it will render. And this particular thing is after it consumes that API, it just renders it. So what we'll do is we'll add one more data set, one more row into this particular CSV. That is API, we have dataset.csv. Okay. So what it is, what is a file change? Okay, this is that blue ocean thing. So we are currently doing changes in the API. So first thing that is going to happen is this guy is going to get triggered once I merge the code. Okay. So because I'm simulating the webhook, so once this guy gets completed, he will go and trigger this guy. Okay, because I've changed those inbuilt triggers. So let me merge the code first. That's holding the API. It finished polling. Now it went to deploying the API. First stage, checkout stage, like how I showed you that time. So we did RMIRF, then it basically cloned that particular repository. It went and tried to see if there is any changes into cube renderer. Now over here it went and it built the Docker image. If you had any test cases, you would run the test cases here. Okay, or you can make it a separate stage. It depends how you do it. Okay. Okay, then it pushed into my Docker Hub account. Okay. Then it basically ran this renderer and it deployed these three objects.
So, if the test cases files, will it push to Docker?
No, so I told you that time, based on the status code that it returns, it will just abort over that. It won't go further. It will say error and it will stop there. Okay. And now it is deployed on stage. Okay. Now it is waiting for the confirmation. So until I confirm over it won't go to production. Okay. So if you see over here, so we have added JSON. Okay. So production is not yet deployed. Sorry. Okay. Production web app is not deployed. API is already deployed. So I'll proceed with this. Okay. So what I'll do is for web app, since I didn't deploy it, so when I was testing it out, I aborted it, so it never went and deployed on production. So what I'll do for now, I will just trigger it manually. You can even trigger it manually. So when it will run over here, it will trigger it. Because I want it to get deployed onto production before I show the next thing. So now that guy is in hold until someone confirms it, will never go and get deployed onto production. So this is for that, right? Let's see.
Or we can do some configuration to auto approval.
No, the whole reason I put that, I put that confirmation is because we want a manual inference. If you want auto, you don't put that particular confirmation itself, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because sometimes you want to be sure everything is running proper. I don't know. It depends on how your dev life cycle is or deployment life cycle is. Now, in our case, we have to get. We have QA team itself. So we can give this access just to a particular team who does a confirmation, like QA. Then you will say, okay, this user has accepted it, and you can make it configured like that. Or you could even chain it with a Slack, where you get a Slack notification saying that, okay, confirm. Suppose you are not around and you want it to be confirmed, so you can confirm it from me. Those integrations can be done. Jenkins has a lot of plugins where you can play around. It's a very powerful tool. So what I have shown and what I've explored is a very, very less. It's a very minor. Okay, so this is production. Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll change this particular background of web app. So I just showed you API. Now let's look into how what happens when you make changes to the web app. So I'm using Vue now. So I'll just change this particular API. Okay, this is the change. I merged, so it should start triggering here. Polling the web. Okay, it started deploying. So it did update over here, so over here. We did a change around same steps, but it's a different repository, different application. Bye bye. Deployed on staging. Okay. So we'll check. So it'll take a little while out. I forgot to show you this portion. 12 seconds back, it deployed web app. Okay. So if you check, this is staging, right? It has changed. The reflection on the code changes now. But if we say production, it has not yet deployed, because we are not yet confirmed. So if we confirm it here, deployment is done. So if we change the namespace from staging to production, the web is deployed. 6 seconds, 11 seconds back. Just change.
how is the GitHub communicating with the Jenkins when deployed?
I think you missed that beginning at the start.
Yeah,
I told.
wow.
So what I did, currently I have not added webhooks because I didn't want to make it complicated, because anyone can test this out on local. Okay, so what I've done is I'm running a freestyle job, Jenkins freestyle job, that just does a SCM
Cron.
polling. It does, yeah, cron, every 1 minute does a SCM polling, which is not recommended on production. But
Yeah,
this is-
that's what I was wondering because webhooks, since it is local, it won't call, right?
I know, that's the whole point of me adding SCM polling for the demo.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to know anything else in this from this demo? Anything regarding Kubernetes or Jenkins, you can ask, I can walk you through. But
The entire setup can be done on local, right? All the three.
yes, it can be done using those scripts. If you get stuck anywhere, you can.
If you want to move it to the actual server,
Actual server, so it depends, like what step would you take? I mean, if you're going to go to a cloud service provider, sometimes Kubernetes is, comes as a service on the cloud. Or else if you want to set up on your own, then you can use kubeadm as a tool. Okay, it's a tool provided by Kubernetes itself to spawn a Kubernetes cluster.
what I want to ask you is, once we have set up everything on the local,
Yes.
so can we move the exact same setup to our server, actual server?
The setup which I just showed, the same script.
Yeah, any setup which we try to do it on local ones.
If you're talking about
pipelines and everything.
yeah,
So the exact same settings can be moved to the actual server.
yes. I mean, what we have, we have a similar setup in our organization, but I'm not sure. I mean, we have like database and all inside Jenkins itself. So we can do. So before even we moved to our production, first we came up with a proof of concept on a local machine itself. Then we tried it out, and then it was the same similar setup which we moved into the cloud. It is not that you can't. You can. You can. I mean, it depends. So we use Salt Stack for. If you heard about Salt Stack, just like Ansible and Chef. So it's a tool where you can keep all your configurations, and when you run it, it just sets it up. So our automation to set up everything happens through that. So even on local, we can run the same thing and get it set up. Even on cloud, we run the same thing and set it up. And once you move to Docker, it's the same thing. It's the same container image that is going to run on your local machine and on the cloud. The container-wise application is the same thing. So what we do is all our testing happens on Docker. So when we move, we just once the code gets merged, the same Docker image just gets built and gets deployed. So even the environment is pretty identical. It becomes really handy. Anyone else?
If you are deploying in AWS or any server, Google or whatever cloud server,
Yes.
and should we, for scaling purpose, already attach or it itself can create an instance and attach to Kubernetes?
It again depends how you configure it. If you have auto scaling group enabled, or if you say like
You can use the use of auto scaling.
yes, you can do those and you can get it provisioned and scale it up. So it's always how you want.
So it can add to master itself. Kubernetes itself can add.
Kubernetes itself can add, you're saying.
Using auto scaling, it can add to
I mean,
clusters.
if you're using their cloud service, then I think they handle. If you are doing it on your own using Kubernetes, you might have to do some work around for that.
Otherwise, we have to
Yes, you have to add
attach it beforehand.
Or else what you can do is you can anytime so you can have a pod running inside your cluster itself, and it knows when there is a requirement, and you can trigger an API or something that goes in spawns of your particular instances for your purpose. It depends. It really depends how your use case is and how you want to solve it. Because sometimes you don't want it to keep scaling up also. If there is a bug in your code, a memory leak, then it will be a problem. So it really depends. Yeah, for Q&A, any Q&A please. We decided.
We are working as a DevOps, is it?
Yeah, kind of. Recently got. We are basically following a DevOps culture also. Yeah. So yeah.
To be sharing this.
Yeah, we'll be sharing this particular slide. And I'll make those corrections on the README files. Okay. And all